everyone, AlphaSoul here and welcome to another video. Today's video is going to be the first in a hopefully long line series covering, it's essentially an info series video where I cover various aspects of Ash's creation and the systems that kind of govern it, right? Now I expect this to change overall as we are currently before the alpha stage. So as you know, many people know, the alpha stage introduces many different changes to kind of game systems and things of that nature. But I figured it would be a good time to get a start, help people kind of learn about Ashes of Creation and get that info out there. As information changes, I will update the video as accordingly and then go from there. So the way the video is going to work is I'm going to start with the base information that we know, and then I'm going to kind of move on to a little bit more fun part, kind of let you guys know what classes I'm interested in, and, you know, just kind of cover and punctuate some things there. All right. Now, just in general, if you have any specific, I guess, questions, or you want to read up about more information, a good site is the Ashes of Creation wiki, which I'm going to go ahead and link below. And there are many great sources of information and content within the community. Jalon provides some there. If you go to the Q&A channel, Margaret and Toast are great resources they cover. And then just a lot of the content creators will often have answers to the questions that you have. So that's pretty much it. Without any further ado, let's just go ahead and get started. Now, there are 8 primary archetypes in the game. When I refer to archetype, I'm really referring to a class. Most MMOs or RPGs refer to them as classes, and I may kind of intermix that, but the official linguistics for this, or nomenclature for this from Ashes of Creation, is archetype for it, right? So when you first start out the game, you're going to be able to choose one archetype, and it's of 8 classes. Now, the archetypes in question are Fighter, Tank, Rogue, Ranger, Mage, Summoner, Cleric, and Bard, right? Now I'm going to go ahead and stick a graphic up there. It's going to become a little bit more clear as I explain things and get into a little bit more detail, all right? Now, of those 8 classes, each has a purpose, right? Ashes of Creation works across a system called the Trinity. If you haven't heard of the Trinity, what it basically refers to in game mechanics is 3 primary roles, right? One is your tank. The tank is focused on keeping whatever you're fighting's attention, soaking up damage. The second is the damage dealer. Damage dealers are the ones focused on actually doing the killing and killing the creatures. And then the third is the usual, the healer, right? The healer is responsible for restoring damage and keeping the party alive in general, right? So that same archetype is what Ashes of Creation is kind of based around. And these classes each fulfill a role or sometimes crossover roles within that trinity. So a good example of what has been given already is the tank class will govern controlling the battlefield and survival, focusing on survival. The mage will do dealing damage and area effect damage. Rogue, stealth, and critical damage. And then finally the cleric, who's got healing damage. Now, some of the other 4 classes, they will have other functions. You can kind of guess what they might be. When you're looking at the fighter, it might be, almost controlled damage, whereas, summoner might be some combination of that. There are a lot of different fun little combinations that you can potentially make with that. But yes, your primary archetype is what you'll have up until level 25. Once you hit level 25, you'll be able to pick a secondary archetype. This secondary archetype, once you combine the 2, will form your main class. Now, the secondary archetype is the same. You can pick it amongst the 8 classes, and that's where that tree comes into handy, right? You have a 8x8 grid, which gives you a combination of 64 total classes, right? So if you pick, for example, a fighter and a ranger together, you get a hunter, right? So that is your class. And that kind of governs the general gist of it. Now, within each of your classes, within each of the 8 classes, you also get skills, right? So each class has its own set of skills as you level up, right? So for example, a fighter, you may have a charge skill at level 1, and at level 2, you may get a dash skill, you may get a slice skill, an eviscerate. Just like most MMOs go, you gain more skills as you level, right? That's not strange at all. It's kind of something that we see. Now, the key thing to notice is these skills that you get can be augmented with the secondary archetype that you choose. So that class that you choose at level 25 you can then take some of the aspects of that secondary class and use it to augment the skills in the first class that you chose, right? That's really the basis of this class intermixing, right? So when we think about it, right, the secondary augmentation, again, provides the skills, and once you augment those skills, you can change some aspects of that skill in many different ways. Let me give you an example, and it's an example that's been used quite frequently. Let's say that you have a fighter, right? Your fighter, you have a standard, well, let's just say fighter or tank, you have a standard charge, right? And that charge allows you to run over and hit a creature at accelerated speed, right? Well, let's say that you choose a mage for your secondary archetype, right? It's already been stated, for each of the secondary archetypes that you choose, you're going to have 4 different schools kind of augmentation that each one will bring. And the mages has already been thrown out that it could be teleportation and then elemental. So like teleportation, ice, fire, and electricity. We're just going to go with those for a bit, would be the 4 augmentations that you can choose for mage. And again, just speculation, it's not been hammered out, but let's say that those are. If you applied, for example, the teleportation augmentation to your charge, it would do a blink. So rather than running over there and hitting your creature or hitting another creature, you would just blink to that creature instead, right? If you augmented it with fire, it could potentially be a knockback, right? So you'd run over there and charge and hit him, and he'd bounce back or something of the sort. If you did it with ice, it could potentially charge over and leave a trail behind you that slows enemies, right? Or on hit slows them. Or if you did electricity, it could potentially bump up the charge speed or do something like stun at the end when you actually hit. So there are many different aspects, and that's just with the mage, right? If you chose something, considering that each has 4, if you chose rogue, it could be something wild. Summoner, cleric, doesn't matter. You have many different combinations that you can do to your particular skill, right? So already off the top of my bat, I'm just thinking of so many different things that you can do with a secondary class and ways that you can augment your first class, right? Many different ways. And if going along that same line, if you really start to think about it, tank is control and survival, right? So the augmentations that it brings would be centered around that. So you can add it to your skill to add survivability or controlling the battlefield of sort. A lot of different fun combinations, and that really is the basis of this mix and match skill thing, right? Now, in addition to all this, every time you level, you get skill points to go ahead and allocate. Think of it just like your traditional skill trees. In most MMOs, you might have something like 3 different skill trees, one with damage, one defense, one offense, or something like that, where you can, as you level up, add points into those trees that will help augment you. So that is in addition to all this other stuff. So many customization options that are available within the class system as described. Now, as moving on to some general information, there's just some things that I want to cover that, are probably frequently asked questions, if you will. So one, as far as class balance goes, it's been frequently stated that class balance will be done at the group level, meaning they will be balancing the game to more suit groups, right? So tackling group content, tackling group PvP, things of that nature, it will be balanced at the group level. What does this mean in practicality? There will probably be clear favorites, especially in one-on-one classes that just do better, in a solo type setting or just a lone wolf type setting, just because they're not balancing for 1 versus 1. So you can expect to see classes that are clearly better favorites in that aspect or another. So that's just one thing that they've thrown out there that could change. We'll see how it goes. Second is their intention is that the role that there will be a role for each of the 64 classes. So no matter what combo that you choose, you will fit in somewhere within the group aspect, right? That is very important from the development standpoint, and I know that's one of my annoyances is when you have classes that nobody really ever plays because, well, they stink, right? So there should always be a clear-cut role that, each of those classes can fill and be, viable in. So that'll be interesting to see how they actually end up doing that. Your primary archetype, in other words, the first class you select at level 1, cannot be changed. So if you are a fighter at base, you are always a fighter. If you are a bard at base, you are always a bard. Your secondary one, however, can be changed. Now, it's already been stated that it won't be easy to change necessarily. You may have to do a quest to do it. You'll have to do it back in town. It's not something that you can change on the fly. You'll have to, kind of go through steps to change it, but you will be able to change your secondary class, not your primary class though. Or primary archetype, sorry. You got the vernacular going wrong. Now, and one last thing, as far as classes go, and I think this is kind of interwound with it, any class can use any piece of armor. It doesn't matter what's there. Certain abilities may require certain weapon types to be equipped, but for example, like Shield Bash, you may have to have a shield in order to do that. But for the most part, any class can use any weapon, any armor, right? Doesn't matter. There's no restriction based on that. So that's even further customization that you can make to the kind of play style that you actually want. So I'm really looking forward to some exciting classes now, or exciting class combinations. And when they say that you can really make yourself into a unique snowflake, if you will, it really does make sense based on all of those options put together. You're, choosing your primary, okay, start off. Your secondary, yeah, even within your secondary, you've got 4 different types that you can augment your skills with. And then on top of that, you've got your skill points. And then on top of that, you've got your weapons and armor that you can select out of any single type to kind of mix and match and do what you want to do with it. Absolutely fantastic. Now, looking at the class list, there is one of each class. I thought it would be fun to pick out one of each class that I'm actually looking forward to, right? So for the fighter, I think the class that I'm most interested in is the Blade Dancer, right? Fighter Bard. The reason I'm interested in this class is it would be interesting to, have a damage dealer that also has some support capabilities with the group, more a melee-oriented support type character that does damage as well too. That I find very interesting. For tank, I think the Night Shield, for me, I'm finding really interesting just because for the tank, I like the aspect of controlling the battlefield, if you will, and I really like the stealth aspect of rogue. So if I could somehow combine that in order to either move around or, I guess you could say gain greater access to control of the battlefield, that sounds really fun. The rogue, which is going to be more than likely my main class, Night Spell sounds really interesting, and that's rogue plus mage, right? So that one, I'm imagining, a stealthy crit type character with the ability to do some, magical augmentation. So for example, a backstab, if you add a teleportation augment to something like that, you could potentially blink backstab or something of the sort. So many cool combinations that I'm thinking of that you can potentially do with that, but, obviously we'll see how it actually turns out. Ranger, Sentinel, Ranger Tank, which is a Ranger Tank combo. This one I think would be very interesting, only because I'm interested to see if, a Ranger could be made into a tank of sorts, or, something that can help offset and deal damage. It sounds really interesting, but, it's class combo. For the Mage, Arc Wizard or Arch Wizard, Mage plus Mage, right? Doing the most amount of damage and devastation that's around there. Potentially, it sounds really interesting. We'll see how it goes. For the Summoner, I think the Enchanter is really interesting. It's Summoner plus Bard, right? So potentially some pets that will be able to provide buffs or, augments to the whole group. It'll be, something that's interesting to keep sight of, or something maybe a pet that can heal or something along the lines. Although you would potentially, no, Summoner and Cleric is Necromancer, I think. So, yes, we'll see how that works out. But, Cleric, High Priest. I like the idea of a super healer, super buffer. So Cleric plus Cleric. I like that combo. And then finally, we've got the Bard, right? I like the Soul Weaver combo. So a buffer, an ultimate support class type thing is what I'm imagining with any of this. But, we'll see how it goes. So that's pretty much it, guys. I hope this has been a good, just overall buffer of what you can expect with classes with Ashes of Creation. If you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free, put them down below in the video, or, send me a note or ask any one of the others within the community. This is generally a pretty good community that, is very open to providing answers to questions that people have. All right, that's it. Thank you guys. Take care of yourselves. Alpha Soul out.